All right, ladies and gents, welcome to Leadership Conversations with Kirsty Mack. And we have got a super special guest today. He's joining us from London. He's not in God's country, so I'm just going to introduce you to the brilliant Damian Hughes. I am so delighted. It's ridiculous the amount of people that have said, oh my goodness, we've got Damian, we've got Damian. And as we do with all of these, I kind of introduce, although I don't believe he needs many introductions. And I'm lucky enough, in terms of my experience of knowing Damian, I'm lucky enough to have either hosted Damian and sort of brought him onto stage, or indeed been on the same stage as him. Remember when we used to do stages? Remember when there was stages, David? Remember those days?
Back in the day.
They were the day. And it's really interesting, the comments that have already started to come through about Damian is that the words that came through in all of the comments were humility, genuine, authentic, great guy, and a brilliant sense of humour. Now, I can tell you that sense of humour is spot on, although slightly wrong at some situations. I'm not, from a Glaswegian, there's times when I think, even I'm thinking, Damian, seriously, out loud, which is just wonderful. So I actually use this as an introduction. So anytime I'm hosting Damian, I use this little introduction, and it came from when I was in Budapest, and I was there. And I saw all these little ducats. It's a Scottish word for little sort of grooves in the side of the sideboard. And I was like, what are they? And they said, oh, that was for the cigars. That was the cigars that people would put their cigars in. They would come out, smoke, go back into Parliament, come out, smoke, go back into Parliament. And they said there was a brilliant phrase in Budapest in the Parliament which says, a speech is worthy of a good cigar. And so if they heard a great speech from one of the politicians, then what they would do is they would just forget the cigar and they would be there. I do not know anyone else that I can hand on heart say, as much as I've seen Damian, probably about 50 odd times, he is definitely worthy of a good cigar. So I don't know if anyone's sitting in their little home office just now with a Hamlet and just sort of chilling out. But here he is, Professor Damian Hughes.
Oh, well, I could do with taking you everywhere with me, Kirst. Imagine that. Like being an MC before like a boxing match or something. You go in a room and just come out with an introduction like that.
I mean, like when you're going in for your messages, going in for your big shop. It's just like walking into a supermarket. Ladies and gentlemen, this man, worthy of a great cigar, I give you Professor Damian. They're just like walking in with your trolley. Okay.
Well, I remember years ago, back in 2000, Mike Tyson, the boxer, came to Manchester, and he came to the boxing club that my dad ran. And we got a call one day that said, oh, he wants to come, but he wants to come at 2 a.m. To train, because that was the same time of his fight, so he wanted to adjust his body clock. So me and my dad went down. It was a really cold bit of January, sort of middle of the night, and we went down to let him in. And this big limo turned up, and before he got out, this guy called Crocodile, who looked like he was dressed to go to war in Iraq, got out of the car, and he went, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you," and me and my dad were sort of like looking around, and we were the only ones on this deserted street. You went, "The baddest man on the planet, Mr. Iron Mike Tyson."
What did you do?
We just sort of stood there bemused, and like, to be fair, Mike Tyson got out of his limousine and looked embarrassed. Right. But I've often thought I'd like a crocodile in my life. I'd like somebody that just walks ahead of you, any sense of there's nobody here, and still gives you the big talk. So if that role ever comes up, Kirst, you've got it.
Thank you. I feel like I could be your crocodile. This is it's official. This is live. People know that you've said this, right? If that
the job offer
goes up and I'm not in, like, people have seen this. So one of the questions that I ask, and I ask anyone who's viewing this to fire in questions, I'm always looking to see what your questions are in your comments, is what, so we're here in July, apparently. What are your 3 feelings for today, for the week that you've got ahead of you?
Oh, wow. I'm feeling excited, feeling very grateful, and feeling a little bit nervous.
Oh, okay. Excited and nervous. I like it. About what?
Well, I'm down in London at the minute, so this is one of the first visits I've done since lockdown. So it felt sort of very dystopian last night when I arrived at the station. You know, people walking around in face masks and being like streets being deserted and things like that. So that sort of made me feel quite excited, but a little bit nervous as well. And then the reason that I'm down here is I'm recording some episodes of a podcast, and I always feel a little bit like this, that I'm on the edge of my pants, like I'm on the seat of my pants a little bit. So I'm never sure quite what I'm doing with it. So that excites me, but again, makes me feel a little bit nervous, but feel really grateful as well. Just feel very lucky, both in this sort of climate, what's going on, but also just I enjoy doing what I do. So I often think I feel very lucky to have found something like that.
I love how you just say, I'm just doing some episodes for a podcast, when everyone that's tuning in knows what that podcast is. So we've got, this is the second series comes out today of the High Performance Podcast, yeah?
Yes. So that gets launched. Launched. It sounds really grand, doesn't it? It's like nothing happens to me. Yeah, yeah. But the second series comes out today. So these are interviews that'll come like later on, so in another couple of months, I think.
We were talking about it the other day when we were doing like tech checks and stuff, and it is such a. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the threads that kind of came through, because I think listening into them, there seems like quite big themes that come through. But it's such a humbling experience to have an hour with someone that just comes and tells you their story.
Yeah, very much. I think this is one of the things that like it builds momentum. So, well, it's like your podcast with Jim. Like so when you listen to that after a few episodes, you know what you're tuning into. So like the rhythm of it and things like that it's easier to plug into. And I think because we've got a different guest, I think what's been helpful is that some of them have bothered to listen to some of the previous ones, and they know that you're not trying to stitch them up, you're not trying to catch them out or trip them up. You're interested in just asking simply, where you're really good at something, why are you really good about it? What's the decisions that you've had to make to be really good? And I think once that happens, you can feel them sort of relax a little bit and just come with you on it. So give you a really simple example. Like when we first did it, we hadn't launched it, and there was a guy called Dylan Hartley that was the England rugby captain, and he came in, and the way I think about it was, he turned out to be a nice guy, but that wasn't my first impression. So he walked in, and he was in that sort of spiky, combative mode that I think he'd retired, and I don't think he'd quite made that transition to being a retired former rugby player. And when we introduced ourselves, he said to me, he said, I've met loads of people like you, he said, and I've chewed them up and spat them out. And I was like, oh, right, okay. Well, nice to meet you.
Good morning.
Yeah. And then I said to Jake, do you mind if I kick off with the first question? And he went, no, fine. And the first question I said to him was, why did you feel the need to be aggressive to me on my first meeting? We've never met before. I don't. And he went, oh, I was only having a bit of fun. And I went, no, I understand that. But it was quite a spiky first opening. And then I sensed there was a moment about 20 minutes later where he finally just relaxed and let us in, rather than thought we were trying to be clever with him or try and make him look silly. And he seemed to relax. And I think that's been nice, that the people we've been interviewing for the second season seem to have just got that idea a lot quicker. Yeah. So it flows a lot nicer.
And so I'll stick with the podcast, because so you see, I saw it originally come out. I know we'd spoken. I can't even, concept of time is gone, right? But I know we'd spoken. You were saying, look, this might be happening. I was like, this sounds amazing. You'd met Jake and you were having a chat. And then all of a sudden you'd had that conversation, and then I see like High Performance Podcast. And it was just that, of course, typical Damian. I think this is going to happen. And here we've launched. And it felt, I was like, oh, it's going to be quite, because obviously in terms of who you had on first, I was like, it's very much geared towards sport. And then I've listened to every single one and gone, this is not geared towards sport. This is about, just exactly as you said, hearing people that are brilliant at what they do, and finding out how they did it. And it feels like your intention from both yourself and Jake was about to not put someone on a pedestal and say, this is the person and this is what I've done. And because the stories that we're hearing from people, there's a lot about parenting that comes through. There's a lot about, just this is my story. We heard rawness from Kelly Holmes. We've heard rawness from quite a lot of the people. We've got Holly on there. What's been the themes for you? So if you could, from that first series, and you already know kind of what's happening in the second one kind of coming up in the people, what are the core themes for you that come through that really resonate with you?
I think like quite a few people have asked me about the guys, like people that they've maybe seen as performers, or they have a perception and they go, oh, what are they like? So say like Rio Ferdinand, I think a lot of people that maybe follow sport have got an impression of him, and I did as well. And I think the best way I could describe pretty much all of them has been how normal they are. And you can almost discount that for a moment. And then I think, well, what does that tell you? And I think what it shows you is that the very best at whatever they do have a degree of balance, that they know they're incredibly skilled in one area of their life, or they've had real good fortune in a certain area, and they're able to articulate and explain just why they're good and how they came to be skilled at it. But they've also got that sense of awareness that just because I'm skilled as a footballer doesn't mean that I'm skilled as a business person, or I'm skilled as a parent, or I'm skilled as a partner. And they've got that curiosity then to want to try and understand and explore it. So I think the normality of it is what's really struck me, that these are like my wife's got a real challenge about some of the guys that we've interviewed, because she says a lot of these high performers are not particularly rounded, balanced people. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of weirdos amongst them, or obsessives, or things like that. And I think what's been interesting is that, again, in asking them about this question, some of them have gone, yeah, I've realised that I needed to work on myself a little bit more, because it took so much from, like Kelly Holmes, for example, was lovely when she was speaking about, although she was at the peak of her career, she was cutting herself and harming herself, which felt like she was very open and vulnerable in the way she spoke about it. And I think she's in a different place now than what she was then. Yeah. And I think she's realised that working on yourself to be a little bit more rounded and have some balance is just as powerful as being great at one particular aspect of your life.
Yeah. I can't remember, I think it might have been in the wrap-up one that you were talking about, and it really resonated with it. It was either you or Jake that said it, and I wrote it down in case I forgot. It's about a lot of the people seem to have been, like Kelly, have been through some struggle. So we might see, we see the highlight reel, don't we? We see her getting the medals, we see all these things happening. But to hear her story about, how she felt like nothing at school, and then it was through sport that she felt that she'd become something.
Yeah.
There was also that thing about fault versus responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the right phrase?
Yeah. So that's a big phrase that Jake hammers, because I mean, he's got a fascinating story himself, that he was a kid that was really severely bullied at school. Like when he's told me some of it just sounds horrific, and I think that's had a lasting effect on him. I think that's a big driver for him to want to do a podcast to help people that have gone through similar issues like that. But he sort of learned, like, the big thing that he spoke about when he first asked me to do it was, he said that he was a kid from Norfolk that felt very much on the fringes of things, and then he sort of made a career for himself in TV. And he said it was only when he was doing Formula One that he was meeting all these amazing people that, as a kid, he thought there must be some secret, or they must have been born amazing. And he said he came to realise that most of them had just imposed their will on a situation. That they decided that it wasn't their fault where they were born, it wasn't their fault they were bullied, but it was their responsibility on how they were going to deal with it. And he said it was like a penny dropping moment for him. So when we do the podcast, it'll be him that'll often bring up that theme, because it runs really quite deep in his own life, that it really matters to him to try and share that. So the intent behind the podcast has been like there's a purity to it, I'd say, that neither of us are doing it for financial gain. We're not doing it for profile or anything like that. There is a purity of this might help people, and I think that's been really pleasing to be involved with it for that.
And I like the mixture of people that you have on in terms of, so my original thought was wrong in terms it was only about sport, and because you had, was it Stephen Bartlett, the guy who did social media? I can't remember.
Yeah. Stephen.
Amazing. And also Holly Tucker, who delivered my favourite line ever.
Go on, I'll let you say it. Go on.
I need to make sure I get this right, which is it's better to have a hole than an arsehole.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah.
I remember I was out for a walk and I was listening to I applauded, like I was walking along.
It's a great phrase, isn't it? Yeah.
Just brilliant. And that was her talking about the impact that it can have when you've got someone in your team that is either toxic or, or that whole sort of, oh my God, we're getting so busy, I need to have someone in my team, and don't just go for anybody.
Yeah.
I loved it. So
yeah, I mean, there's a guy on this second series that I'd say to anybody, if you don't like, if you're not interested in listening, that's fine. I get that. But there's one that I just say, just listen, just because it was so powerful. We interviewed a lad called Marcellino Sambe, who's the principal lead for the Royal Ballet, and his story is just so powerful. He's a black kid from the slums of Lisbon, where ballet is not even thought of as a career occupation. His father died when he was 6, and he was put into care. And it was while he was there that he sort of went to his local community, realised he could dance, and has found himself. He came out when he was 16, which I think is incredibly brave. And now he's like the first black principal dancer for the Royal Ballet. And he came, and I just felt like a real warmth from him. I just thought, this is a guy that's just completely at ease with himself and his story. And one of the questions I asked him, like, it makes the goosebumps or the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I asked him. I said to him, I don't know anything about dancing or ballet. I said to him, would you describe for me how I would see you when you're on the stage and you're at your absolute best? How would I see you? And he said, I dance with a freedom. And he used this phrase where he said, I'm the 5-year-old boy dancing in the slums of Lisbon, and I take him on stage with me. And I see my role is to protect him from all the pressures that come as a principal lead, that I take that 5-year-old boy that just loves to dance and feels free and has escaped when he walks on the stage. And it was just such a powerful, profound response. And I just found it really beautiful that it was like, this is somebody that I didn't know a great deal about. I'd done the research on him, but to come up with a phrase like that just really moved me. So again, I'd encourage people. I don't know when or where he is in the series, but he's well worth just tuning into and listening to somebody.
I remember you told me that just last week, and I was still just like, oh, just how, because you could, I don't know, I can visualize him dancing, and just all that energy must be amazing. So in terms of the podcast, you're seeing some brilliant people, but I think, you are, anytime that I've seen you talk, you're talking about change, you're talking about teams, you've written too many books. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Are you 12 now? Is it 12 books?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, see, people like
no. Sorry, that sounds. Yeah.
It's just that I can't remember.
No, but you were looking at one there, so there's been somewhere I've just self-published them and brought them out, and
I love them.
Things like that.
I was looking at the old school. So for anyone who's a diehard Damian fan, you'll have this one. And I love it. I was doing some stuff on change, and this is like change inspiration. I just wanted to get back into it. And then obviously we've got this, and I've got a pile of them here, and they're all on my iPad.
Thank you.
I think, and that's what I love about them, is because they are very much you. And I suppose because I've met you, I can hear you as I'm reading them. I've been speaking to quite a few people clearly about change, because there's been an ounce of change in the world.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to one group of people from a technical perspective, IT, and they were saying, actually, I think people are more receptive to change just now because they've just seen it go, massively so. What are the things that are still really prevalent about, helping people through change and, working with teams that you think would really help people just now, given the amount and the depth of change that they've gone through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things that might be helpful. I think the first place I always start when you sort of encouraging anyone to sort of embrace changes is just that simple idea of, when have you already done it? So let's find evidence of when you've already embraced change, and then let's explore those moments where that's happened. So, like you say, the last 3 months have been brilliant, that people have been almost forced to adapt because of circumstances. So rather than take that for granted, or to sort of externalize it and say, oh, I had to do that, you say, but you've still responded to it. So let's look at how you've responded and what we've taken out of it. So I always phrase that success leaves clues. And the reason for that is that you should always stop to excavate those moments of success and work out, why were you good? So rather than just say I was lucky or circumstance, no, why were you good? What are the controllable factors that you've demonstrated? So I think for anybody that's lived through this last period, there will be lots of success leaves clues moments that you can excavate to understand it. I also think another thing that's worth doing that is, once you've done that, like Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy, had a great phrase that I sometimes remind people of, that he says, when we look in the future and people say, oh, what's going to change in the next 10 years? He says a more helpful question is actually, what's going to stay the same? Because because that's where we should be directing our energy. And that question of what remains the same, however much the workplace change, or however much we're going to be forced to embrace, things like being kind to ourselves and to each other, being connected to other people, feeling that we've got something of value to offer, working on things that we can control rather than others, they're not going to change. However seismic the shift is going to be in the next few years, those principles are still going to remain the same, and that's where we need to be investing our time.
It seems like there has been, I've said a few times, it wasn't policies and procedures that got us through this, it was humans that got us through this. It was, there seems to be more humanity. People are a little less scared of IT and tech now, because there's just like, well, we needed it to get through. In terms of teams, because your focus on teams and your knowledge and experience of working with teams in a business and a sporting context is vast. We're at that stage now that people are coming off furlough. Some people have not been on furlough, some people have. So it feels like a lot of the conversations I'm having with teams is about, how do we integrate? How do we bring people back together? And just wondering what your thoughts would be. It feels like I was thinking about the 5 steps to a winning mindset. Things like storytelling and tripwires, it feels are probably more prevalent now than even ever before, Damian.
Yeah, very much. I think I think the way we learn is through stories. So I think we all need to have some kind of shared narrative about, so from a team point of view, about why we're doing this and how we're going to come through it. And again, let people tell their own stories for it. So when we tell stories, there always has to be a theme. So it might be a theme of overcoming a big challenge. It might be a theme of creativity and working together, or it might be a theme of sort of overcoming the odds. And I think if you're going to bring a team together now, what's your story going to be that gives us that binding force of why we're all in it together and what we've experienced? I think that can be a powerful way, because if you sort of scale it up and say, well, what does that do? It creates a sense of belonging. If we've got a shared narrative, we feel that even if we're not physically present with other people, we share the same journey that we're on. And that sense of belonging is going to be critical for this. That I know we were laughing before we came on air about scenes of people going, like, rushing to the pub when it opened. And I think what that tells you is that we're social animals. We just want to connect with other people, and that shared space has been taken away from us, and people are desperate to get back there, whether it's a pub, whether it's parks, whether it's just going around to others' houses, is going to be key. So storytelling can be a big part in bringing us together as a binding force. The second idea that you mentioned about tripwires, again, I think this has been really really useful for people that have been working at home about making that transition from being at home in your personal time to going somewhere to be a professional, is just those tripwire moments that you can lay out for yourself before you do it. So it might be when you cross the threshold of a certain room, that's where you snap into professional mode, or that's where you shed your professional image and become a partner or a parent again. I think we need to lay out little tripwires around our world that help us make that transition a lot easier, because the daily commute has gone. You know, those moments of being able to make that transition are not there, so we need to pivot and find new ways.
How do people create a good culture? So given that we were just having a conversation there with Billy as well, in the green room, given that a lot of organizations are now thinking, actually, maybe this working from home malarkey is working. Finance directors are going through and really looking at the numbers. I mean, Billy's talked about this as well. How do you create a culture when you don't have that office space, you don't have that shared space that people come to, and people are disparate in their own homes? What sort of things would help people with regards to that?
Well, when we talk about culture is what happens in the shadows anyway. It's what happens when nobody's looking, is what you're trying to do. So in a workplace, there'll be moments where you could behave in a way that nobody would ever see, but you need to be confident that they're still going to behave in a way that represents your culture as best as possible. So I don't think much has changed in terms of the definition of it. So the methodology of answering that question is, you have to be really clear in a good culture, or what I term a commitment culture. You need to be really clear on the non-negotiable behaviors that get you to be a member of that culture. So again, I often talk about this distinction between values and behaviors. And it's not that one is better than the other. It's just that a behavior should emanate from your values of trust, for example. What's the behavior that demonstrates that you are trusted? Is just a really simple way of explaining it. So for any organization now, you need to be really clear of what those values and by definition the behaviors that you demand of people are. And then you just simply adapt them to this new normal of you still behave that way even when nobody's watching you. So if you're working from home, you still have that confidence that is it's an intrinsic driver within somebody in your organization that they would demonstrate those behaviors. So like take a really simple example, like there's a really lovely example that I read years ago, that Walt Disney, one of his non-negotiable behaviors was creativity. So when he went to meet somebody, the first thing he would do is take them for something to eat. And one of the things he would observe was whether they would flavour their food with salt and pepper before they tasted it. Because that was a simple tripwire for him of that person isn't open-minded enough to at least taste the food before they decide to flavour it, which set the alarm bells ringing for him that maybe they're not open-minded and curious enough to come and be creative in his organisation. So there's lots of ways you can still find this out when you're recruiting people this is where it's going to require a big investment of time and energy to help people just discern what these values and behaviours mean in a new working environment. So it's a long answer to your question, but I would say go back to these behaviours, but make the time to allow people to just reinterpret them in this new way of working.
And get people, we talk about build-in versus buy-in. If people are, if you're bought into the values or behaviours, I've basically sold them to you. But if I can get you built into them and we're having a conversation, and actually as a team we've gone back and said, yeah, actually that behaviour still fits, that one maybe looks a little bit different, as it is, there's a wider conversation and people then are more invested in it, because we've all, we've rocked up to companies, we've been in companies where, we've whacked, what we've done is we've put the values on a lanyard.
Brilliant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they expect it goes in by osmosis, and And I think that's a really important thing about this idea of getting people to build it. That I think it's Peter Drucker used to say, if you want to know somebody's priority, if you want to know somebody's values, he said, give me access to your bank balance and your diary, and I'll know how serious you take it. And I think that's going to be a really nice indicator for people that want to seriously adapt to this new way of working. How much time are you going to invest in talking about culture, and how much time and energy and money are you going to invest in doing this? Because I think this, so if you're doing it once a year at a management conference, and then sticking it up on these lanyards, or you're debating it and hoping it goes in by osmosis, you're not taking it seriously. This has to be a monthly discussion that you allow people to structure and engineer these behaviours every month, that they can think about it rather than try and come up with the answer at the start. This idea of build it over a period of time by investing the time to discuss it and allow people to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that investment is really important, because we could get into that way where I feel that I think there is a slight tension that for some people is existing, depending on how things have been communicated in the organisation, of some people being on furlough, some not. Some people have had brilliant communication from the organisation, some people have had no communication from the organisation. And it's so important that we go back into, and not just do as you say, like, let's get everyone together on Zoom and yay, here's our values, let's remember them again. It's actually, what have we demonstrated in the last 3 months? And actually, is there elements of that we want to keep, or is there elements of that we think, let's not do too much of that again? And just because a lot of people are worried about, there are some personality types that just want everything to get back to normal. And I don't like, and I've said this a couple of times, I don't necessarily like that thought process of the new normal, but I think we could grow through this, we could learn through this massively.
Oh yeah, hugely. Like, I remember somebody saying to me years ago that if you think of like the fastest sport in the world, Formula One, it's defined by who manages to rest the best, in terms of who does the pit stops the best. And I think this has been like a brilliant pit stop, that whoever's using this time wisely to go, right, what went well in it, like, you can get back in the race and on those terms. And I think that this, if you use it wisely, has just been a brilliant pit stop for organisations. But those are just going to keep driving round without looking at, actually, the track's changed, the terrain changed, the race is different, are the ones that are going to crash and burn.
I am adopting that story. That will be in every meeting that I have this week. And so I was just thinking about a pit stop. And a lot of people are saying on the comments about very much Glenn was saying about, I agree with the fact that commute to and from work, that those thresholds are really important, as you talked about. Basically, everyone's just having a love in for you just now, just saying hi. So Janet Woods, you'll know, Joanne, Lucy, Bev and Kat and Vicky. Vicky was already smiling 29 minutes ago when we just started. Vicky was already smiling. And we've got Steve from Alica as well. David Harrison is here. So a big shout out to every single one of you. Now I don't know if I can ask you this question, but I'm going to ask you the question. Are you going to write another book? Have you seen this pit stop? Are you going to give us another book, Damian Hughes?
So it felt a bit remiss that we were talking about the podcast, that we'd sort of got first-hand interviews with some of these amazing guys that have been very open and honest, like we described. So we sort of started speaking about it in January. I say we, me and Jake, are saying about this idea of our intentions, as I say, are quite pure, that we want people to take these ideas and use them. So when lockdown started, I thought I'd use it as a chance just to sort of at a more relaxed pace to write. And so I went back through all the interviews we'd done, got the transcripts, and started looking for big themes from it. So we're sort of well on the way on working on that book, and just sharing sort of like, so there's like you mentioned earlier about this idea of like fault versus responsibility. We did an interview with a Dutch footballer called Robin van Persie, and about halfway through the interview, he said, "Oh, can I tell you an example that I used with my 14-year-old son just the other week on this theme?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, go for it." And he gave us this brilliant parenting lesson that he'd adopted with his own son about just stop moaning, because when you moan, you sound like a loser, and and there's a choice here. You can take a bit of responsibility, and just thought conversations like that are like gold dust, because you can give the evidence of sort of like the idea of locus of control, and you can explain that, or you can go listen to how Robin van Persie explained this concept to his 14-year-old son, and that was a clip that seemed to go viral on the back of it. So been working on trying to get those conversations into a book form that that people can sort of take away and sort of find useful. So the short answer is, yeah, I'm sort of well on the way on doing it. Whether it ever gets published or comes out, I don't know, but we've sort of done something, so we'll find a way of getting it out there.
Great. I'm waiting patiently. When I say patiently, I'm not patient. So
Oh,
I know a lot of people waiting. Nathan's here as well, so we say hi to Nathan. I think he was loving your pit stop story. Actually, do you know it's Arnie's? I think it's Arnie's first birthday on Wednesday. I'm sure he said in a message. I can't believe Arnie is now a year old. Not that anyone else who's listening to this knows who Arnie is, but I just thought I'd mention it and do a shout out for Arnie. So what are you? So we're excited about you having your pit stop and writing the book. What are you excited about the future?
Oh wow, I love that question. Yeah, I'm just excited about. So from a personal point of view, I think I decided that my mate was saying to me at the start of lockdown. He said, "Are you Nostradamus?" And the other reason is that I told him in January that I was going to claim a diary for April and much for May.
People,
yeah, I don't know lottery numbers or anything like that, but but the reason was I just felt I was run down and I was exhausted and I just needed a break, and I didn't feel I was being particularly kind to myself in terms of the pace I was going at. So this has felt like a really welcome chance just to get off the treadmill a little bit myself and be a bit kinder to myself. So I think what it's done for me that excites me is I remember. So I've got two kids. So my eldest son is coming up for 11, and my daughter's 7. I know. And I remember before we had them, my wife and I, like, you don't know what you don't know as a parent. You don't know what you're going into. So we went on a parenting course that just and there was a really simple exercise a lady did, and I don't think I appreciated it until we had the children ourselves and during this time, where she got us to write down a list of all the games that you played as a kid, or all the moments you remember from your own childhood. So you scribbled them down, and then you look at them and you said, what do you notice about them? And the thing that stood out, and she had to sort of draw it out of us, was not one of the moments involved anything expensive. So you weren't remembering moments of like going on like flash holidays or anything like that. It was about being in the park, playing with your friends, being with your mum and dad, and it was like really simple moments were the ones that stood out in your mind. And it sort of, I was really reminded of this at the start of lockdown, of because you couldn't do things. It was about going out for a walk or playing games with the kids or just like listening to them and talking and trying to make each other laugh. And I think that's been a really nice reminder. This pit stop for me has felt like a really nice reminder of just go back to the really basic, simple things, that don't get caught up in busyness for the sake of it, but just try and enjoy the simple things and be grateful for it. So that excites me really. I'd like to sort of try and bottle that feeling and keep hold of it.
I love that. I was speaking to my brother who's in New Zealand, and he was talking about, he says, you know what I was thinking about and I miss? He's like, when we were little and it would be cold outside and we'd come inside and we would like, Dad would like lift up his top and we'd put our feet on his tummy because it was warm.
Brilliant.
He's just like, he said, I was just thinking about it because it's like cold in New Zealand just now. I mean, it's warmer than Glasgow, but he's just like, I was just thinking about that. And you know, it's like, that's like, you know, two people in their 40s talking about that with such love and such excitement that, you know, it's those moments that stay with us forever.
Yeah. It's like, well, like in a similar moment, like my daughter was saying to me the other day, she was like, "Oh, do you remember last year, Dad, where she made a tent in a room of just putting like blankets, so like, and she asked us all to do it, and normally go, yeah, I'll do it in a minute, I'll just finish it." And for whatever reason, the four of us went and sat in her homemade tent in her room last year and just read some storybooks. And she was recounting it like really vividly the other day. And again, those moments, you go, we need to do more of those moments of just doing things just for the sake of it without sort of thinking about why we're doing this, just be in the moment and enjoy it.
My parents taught me that really well. During lockdown, I got a WhatsApp message, or as my mum calls it, a WhatsApp message, from my dad that said, right foot to green, right? And I was like, he's obviously sent it to someone. But no, the next picture was of my mum playing Twister. So my dad's 80 on Saturday and my mum's 71 and
fantastic.
And I then proceeded to get sent all of these pictures. My dad's got Parkinson's, so he was finding it tough. So there was just one him wrapped around with the Twister. You're just like, you can't put a value on that, but that forevermore is in my heart.
Yeah, exactly. And it's cost nothing, has it? It's a simple moment, but that moment of connectivity, that's lovely. I love that.
It's just the best. I'll send you the pictures. I've now got a new strap line for the show, and it's from Nathan, and he says this: Kirsty Mac Live is the new Monday morning tripwire.
There you go.
I'm taking it.
Sets you off.
Nathan, I'm taking it. And Shona, thanks for tuning in again. I'm going to let you guys get on with your day. I'm going to let Damian get on with interviewing some other wonderful human. I am so grateful that you took the time, that you got down to London early just to do this.
No, I've loved it. It's been a real treat and an honour to be asked to come on it, Kirst. So thank you for having me.
Oh, you're an absolute star. I can't wait to be on a stage again soon. And just so everyone knows, I have got the brilliant Gavin Oates, who's going to be with me on Monday next week. Now, I always ask my guests for a photo. The photo that's up just now, you will see. But he also sent me another photo of a dancing bear, which I think I'm going to use as my full-on. Yeah, I'm going to use that. So I think that works super well for me. So thank you. You're an angel. You're a star. Go forth and be brilliant as you always are. For everyone else, have a brilliant and absolutely outstanding week. I have a feeling in my waters it's going to be a good week, people. So look after yourselves, and we'll see you super soon.